Today I have the pleasure of Mary Kemp. Good to see you, Mary.
Lovely to see you too, Julian.
Yeah, good to have you on the show. You are an award-winning founder of AI Potential, and that's a company that does hands-on practical AI training to make embracing AI easy and immediately effective in your business. And no surprise to anybody, we will be talking about and exploring the people approach to AI in the workplace. And so using your experience, your of organizations and your brains about AI, because I think obviously it's a huge topic now, and so how we embrace that, but from a people point of view. But before we get into that, I'd like to ask you, what do you love about what you do, Mary?
Oh, I love so much about what I do. And I suspect, like most people, so I'm lucky because we're AI enabled, so I get to do more of what I like and hand off some of the repetitive work to AI. But I love helping people transform because that's what AI enables when used properly. So I can go in and be surrounded by a room of skeptics. And by the end of it, they're like, I had no idea. And my proudest moment, actually, which I wish so I just lock away in my head if I'm ever having a bad day. I did training probably about 18 months ago with the council. It was Brighton Council in this instance. We do a lot of work with local authorities. And it was a group of tutors that were helping displaced people. So in adult education, English as a second language. And a lot of them, it was, that wasn't their job. They were doing it because it brings them joy and they wanted to give back. And as I was leaving, an older gentleman, older than me, came down and really quietly said nothing in the room. And he came down to me and he said, I just want to thank you. You've made me feel okay about it and made me realize how I can use it. So thank you. Just as I went out the door, and I was like, okay, so that's what brings me joy. I love helping people unlock and realize that it doesn't replace them and that their experience is what drives it.
That's a wonderful feeling of dispelling people's fears of what AI can do. And I think there's a lot of talk out there, isn't there, of it's going to take everybody's jobs and we're going to be ruled by computers. And it's a very negative narrative. And we know, like, the press like to have negative narratives. I suppose we want to sort of change that and embrace that in a different way. So let's just start with what you're seeing in organizations today. You've just given us an example there. When companies come to you struggling with AI implementation, what's the most sort of, I suppose, common complaint you're hearing from employees who are trying to implement this?
So there's two levels of complaint. First is the complaint from the leader. I've told everyone to crack on with AI. I don't get why they're not doing it. So that's really common. And the other side of that coin is the leaders that feel like they have to know all the answers and be an expert in every area. So AI has thrown that for a complete loop and they're a complete beginner with everyone else. So that can be deeply uncomfortable if you're sitting in a leader's chair and actually they don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay to be learning at the same time as everyone else, and it can slow them down. So we see that a lot, and the leaders are saying, well, I've thrown it at them and it would do all this stuff. Why aren't they engaging? It's like, so from the employee's perspective, what you've done is ask them to train their replacement. And that's how it can feel at an employee level. So why would they engage with that? Nobody's worried about AI. What we are worried about as humans is uncertainty. And this is uncertainty like we've never seen before. So this is about people, not tech. And so it doesn't matter how great the tech is. If the people don't feel safe and you haven't supported them and you don't have clear guidelines and there's a lot of, there's no AI culture, then you are not going to thrive as an organization. And actually, 70% plus of AI, generative AI implementation in organizations dies on the vine. And that's exactly why, because they focus on the wrong thing.
Give us an example, I should give some context of what AI is doing in organizations and what might be some of those examples that are making people feel concerned, feeling uncertain about their role, their job, and why they're sort of fearing it. What have you sort of noticed in terms of those within your
Yeah, so
organisation?
there's lots. I can give positive and negative. So for the organizations that we work with, it's not about reducing headcount. It's about helping their people lean in. And so we have all different examples, like one big manufacturing company, they want to pay more and employ less. So there's all sorts of experiments going on around work-life balance. So it's not always about profit. Most organizations we work with genuinely care about their people, and it's about using it that way. So what we're starting to see in the market is that entry level roles are restricting. Is that the word? We're seeing many more. Not many more actually entry level jobs. The other thing that's going to start disappearing, and we're already seeing be eroded, is administration, office management, those kind of roles. Now, one of the issues with that is that disproportionately affects women. Because women are often more likely to be in those administrative kind of office management roles. So there is unfortunately going to be a disproportionate impact on them. People worry that AI is going to replace their jobs, and it will not. People using AI will replace their jobs. The message I really want people to understand is that AI, and when I'm saying AI, I'm talking about generative AI, so ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, that AI is a skill and not a tool.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's a different perspective, because people see them as tools rather than a skill. And I suppose putting it as a skill, it means it's more people focused, isn't it? It's more you've got to have a skill to use it as well as it helps you, and that's the difference, isn't it? In that.
Yeah. So as with any skill, you're going to feel overwhelmed, you're going to feel uncomfortable, you're not going to realize what's possible. And this applies to this well. So generative AI is a tool to be curious with and experiment with. Most organizations are operating what I call DIY AI. There is no joined up thinking, they're self-taught. They may not be, in some instances, they're actually wasting time, not saving time. And they're not measuring impact across the organization or having a framework to create that psychological safety for experimentation. And that's what will slow them down. The other great thing, though, is that the majority of businesses in the UK are small businesses, and Gen AI is made for them. So if you're a smaller business, you are more agile, you're able to lean into this far more effectively. We're seeing it across the board. The larger the organization, the slower the implementation. So the more agile organizations are absolutely leaning into this as a massive democratizer of the industry. So yes, this is definitely, and we're in a bit of a David and Goliath zone at the moment, and the smaller businesses can absolutely outcompete the larger.
Because of the size and agility that they have.
Absolutely.
And just thinking on those small businesses, and just an example, it's a negative example, unfortunately, where you might have somebody who is a copywriter, for example, which is, for content, for social media. I know I've spoken to somebody recently, and their work has dropped.
Yeah.
Because people are now doing it themselves, because they can just chuck it into ChatGPT and it will create stuff and everything else. What's your thoughts on that? But also, what would be your just a different side there, but your perspective, but also your advice to that copywriter, per se, for example?
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're heading into a wave of disruption of the likes of which we've never seen before. So the World Economic Forum, which meets in Davos every year, they put out a report around the future of work. And they said in the report in January this year that about 40% of the skills that we use in our job every day will be replaced over the next 5 years. We no longer need them. They're predicting a net employment growth of 78 million jobs over the next 5 years. The issue is that we don't even know what those jobs look like yet. So there's going to be, a huge, and they're calling it the fourth industrial revolution now. So it is going to touch every area of our lives. So for anyone who is being displaced, So copywriters are really common in a lot of the creative areas. So in TV and film, there's a huge amount of displacement because they're using AI to do a lot of that underpinning work for it, and even helping with script writing and things like that. So yes, unfortunately, there are specific industries that are going to be damaged. And if someone is one of those industries, then it's about reskilling and upskilling. And there's two kind of ways of doing that. So we know some copywriters that are, maybe very experienced and have maybe higher level clients, and so what they're doing is doing their best writing. So they are using AI to scope out maybe some of their ideas, and then they're doing their best work. So they're able to be more creative and more innovative, and the clients are continuing to work with them. So the cream will always rise to the top. However, there is going to be a lot of copywriters that will be displaced. So it's then, what is the skill set you have? And what are the opportunities? So it is as horrible as it sounds, it is kind of going back to what is your skills, your core skills, and what brings you joy, and where is there an opportunity for those to marry together. So there is a lot of work going on at a governmental level. We know how quickly they move, though, to look at, because they know this is coming. I mean, it's you don't need to have a crystal ball. It's very clear. So then what are we doing to support people that are disproportionately affected? How are we reskilling them? What programs do we have in place?
Wow. And when you said, the World Economic Forum said 40% of skills will be replaced, I mean, that's a huge amount. And it feels like a massively disruptive, massively change coming our way, which, as you say, needs that support. And a lot of, I suppose, almost reframing our own skills and what we can do, what we're passionate about, and how can I retrain into something different that can, or embrace this. If you're an organization, and you mentioned having an AI culture, which is interesting. And that's the first time I've heard that, but I guess that's coming our way now, isn't it? What sort of approach, if you were a leader in an organization and you want to embrace AI, but not just for, we want to make more profit or more productivity, but actually embrace it in the benefits that it can add to it. Where do you start, and how do you start to create that sort of culture of AI?
Yeah, so great question. So first of all, kind of almost forget about the AI and make sure you're solving problems that need to be solved. So what we'll usually do with our clients is do an AI opportunity mapping session with them. So because it is a bright, shiny object. It's really tempting just to throw it into the mix and carry on business as usual. And that's not how to get the best from AI. So the way to get the best from AI is to spend a little bit of time understanding your business goals and then where AI can align with it, and then spot the particular opportunities in your business. So it's not about going in full force and right, everyone now, you're all AI experts and you're going to integrate it in your role. So we may well do some lunch and learns we may well do some kind of lunch and learns to kind of, because what we want to do is set the scene. This is change management alongside everything else, so that we make it a safe place to experiment and they understand the guardrails of the organization. But then what we want to do is identify where would it actually have the most impact now, and work with particular teams or on particular problems in the business, so that we've got a roadmap. This is where we're starting. This is our hypothesis. This is where it'll have impact. And over time, this is what your AI first organization will look like. This is the benefits it's going to get you, and here's how we're going to get there. So they have that roadmap, that strategy that overlays all of it. It can always be adjusted, but then everyone in the organization actually knows what's happening. And then you can start to go in and work with the teams on those problems and start to map the results. So we even, we do benchmarking. We do what we call transformation reports, where, and because it's all about the culture, not just about the output. So what was the task? How long did it take you with AI? How long did it used to take you? And then the two most important questions: how do you feel about it? And was the output equivalent or better than you? And if you're not tracking that data, then you have no idea of actually, is it moving your business forwards or is it holding it back?
It seems to me we have to be a bit more strategic about it rather than, I sense people are just bolting on, adding on, or this will work, this little tool will work well here, or a bit of chat GPT here to help with some letter writing, email writing. And you've almost got to stand back, as you say, and think more of a, how does that work in my business? How do I incorporate it? And it's almost like thinking of a transformational project that you would do in an organization. If you're changing a way of working, or a business model change, or reorganization, same principles apply here, don't they?
They absolutely do. So it's a big and a small thing. So if someone's listening to this and they're a small business, don't be overwhelmed by that. Just it's about being intentional in your use and about sharing best practice across your organization. There is no right way to use Gen AI. The right way is the way that gives you the best results. So some people are iterative based, some people are very prompt based. But where are you gathering that knowledge so that other people in the organization can learn from somebody that's done a proposal and they've got a prompt that works really well? Where is that being shared? How are you sharing that knowledge?
And we're talking people here, and we're talking change, and the standard things apply, don't they? The whole change curve, how people respond to change. It's the same process, and I think I'm not belittling AI. I'm just bringing it down to a level playing field. This is something new, and just like we had the Industrial Revolution, just like we had computer revolution, all these things that have come in, and we've got through those. But it's that sort of thinking of the people and how people respond. Have you got an example where, I don't know, perhaps you had some more resistance in an organization from people, and how did you navigate that with them?
Yeah. So we love skeptics. If you've got skeptics in your organization, be very excited. We call them meerkats. And what they're basically doing is a 360-degree risk assessment. So someone like me might be like, oh, I love AI, I'm all over, and start playing around with it. And then we've got those skeptics in the organization that are standing back and watching. Do not force them. We love, so in our lunch and learns and everything we do, we call it that aha moment, because most of those skeptics think, yeah, but it can't replicate what I do, and there's fear around it. And at some point they'll get the aha moment. So let them have that aha moment. You can lead them to whatever they need to choose when they drink. What you find with skeptics, if you support them, allow them to come along on their own journey and show them how it's relevant to them, what they're wanting to make sure is that it's safe. But with skeptics, when they feel safe and they have that moment, they flip big time. So they flip and they generally become the biggest internal champions. They will go around to everyone and say, I thought that this was a load of rubbish and it wasn't going to help me, but now it's doing X and now it's doing Y. So, for those skeptics, if you find them, embrace them. They'll actually really move the agenda forward in your organization if you allow them to come along at their own speed. And actually, we've got 100% record of combating skeptics, because it's a mindset. So we've mapped out the 5 stages of AI adoption. First one is fear. I lie. First one is indifference. Meh, it did a poem. It's interesting, but it doesn't apply to me. And actually, we've had that from everyone, from plumbers to taxi drivers, and I can tell them at all levels it applies to them in some way. And then you move on to fear. It's coming for my job. And then you get to what we call the cheating stage, where you're starting to use it, but it might have produced work that you would have taken hours or days to do, and it's done in a really short space of time, and it's good. And then you're like, well, how do I reconcile that? Do I say that I did it? Do I say that I used AI to do it? It feels like I'm cheating. I'm not sure how I feel about that. And then you'll move on to confidence and transformation, where you'll start to, and it's not a linear process. So in the early days, you might be using it and it does a great thing. And the next day, it's really difficult and it comes out with some plausible nonsense, and you lose confidence. And you'll go through many versions of that when you use it in different use cases as well. So it's just to realize as a human, we're going through a massive change cycle and we need to give ourselves grace and recognize that. And the team and the company need to recognize that as well and provide that level of support and safety.
It's interesting, those 5 steps, I say, very mirrors potentially your change curve. And I don't know if you use that in your conversation. So somebody's at that point of indifference where they're like, yeah, what can you do to help those people? Because as you say, that they're going to be in every organization, every walk of life. What can you do, or what have you found helpful to get them to move?
Solve a real problem for them. So use AI to solve a repetitive task. The problem with AI is that it can do everything, which is overwhelming. So for most people, they want to know what's possible and why does it matter to me? So if they're at the indifferent stage, then it's okay. So what's something that you're procrastinating on, or takes you, or feels like work, and is drudgery? It's actually, you're very experienced, you shouldn't be doing that. And then working with them to show how AI can unlock that for them. And generally that gives them a little bit of confidence. I can give you a really simple example of we were working with quite a large plumbing firm, and one of the plumbers had a complex that was one of those fancy heating systems in a commercial building and was really complex. Something had gone wrong with it. And so we obviously upskilled the organization. He opened up the chat app on his phone. It's got video on it. He could show it what was going on. And it agreed with him that there was either one of 2 scenarios. But then what it did do was identify the parts that he would need, put it in a document with him. So it created essentially a proposal for the client. And he said, just that saved me half a day. He's like, I am very happy to be out getting my hands dirty, but all of that back end stuff takes hours and I probably wouldn't have gone back to the client that day. But it did it in about 10 minutes and he could polish it off and get it off to the client. So even, for those and so he's like, I see how it can help me. So it's about helping people understand how it can help them in the right way, because they see loads of lazy AI. You only need to go on LinkedIn for a minute to see people that have used AI to generate posts. What you're not seeing is all the people that have used AI to generate posts, but they've made it in their own voice. They have tidied it up. So they've got it to do some of the heavy lifting. So they're not on a blank page, but they've made it their own. It is their own work. And so that kind of, so when people see all the lazy AI, it really, especially if they're in the indifference or the fear stage, it really puts them off and validates that whole thought process of it's not for me. So you need to show them what good AI looks like.
I guess it make it more relatable for them by being specific, i.e. the plumbers. That's great to show them what it can do for you. And then that actually makes you, just in that, it's a wow moment, isn't it? Something, and I get wowed with some of the stuff I can do with AI. I still think it's amazing and think, wow, how have I lived my life not without this? That's incredible. But as you say, it allows you then to do that more creative things, allows you to be, I use it more as a thinking partner as well. I can bounce off, I can create things. And so and you're in isolation, it can be really helpful. So we have indifference. Fear is a very emotive type of thing. How do you overcome that when people have that? Because that must be, and I think the scary bit that is all about the loss of jobs bit, isn't it? It's going to replace me. I guess that's the big fear.
So I suppose there's a few, and sometimes it sounds awful, but sometimes we'll use a little bit of tough love, which is there is no getting off this AI train. So we've all been signed up to this big experiment. So it is a question of finding a way that you feel comfortable with. So usually the fear goes away when they realize what it unlocks. So they'll still feel fearful However, you can feel scared and do it anyway. So a lot of them will get to that place where they realize that it can actually unlock and help them more than it will harm them. And the other thing that happens as well is that, and we spoke about AI culture. What is the AI culture? Because if they're in a team that's created psychological safety, that are all experimenting in their own ways with AI, then that normalizes the use of AI and allows them to come on board as they wish to.
And just sticking with fear, and people might have concerns, and I've been interested in your thoughts, where it feels out of control is a big tool. It feels it's just going at a pace, and there's policy, well, that's governmental policy catching up, data concerns, security, all that. And I know we're probably trying to catch up really with where AI is going. What are your thoughts on that, and how do we alleviate those perhaps concerns about that?
And they're the right concerns to have. You know, we're feeding our data into a black box. What on earth happens with it? Can another company go, company X, tell me what their plans are for the next quarter and what's their marketing? You know, how much are they going to spend? And so there's a lot of concern about that. So first thing, just from a practical point of view, AI doesn't store the data in that way. So you're not going to be able to go and find out what company X was doing. And they all have very clear online security portals, so you can go and check that all out for yourself. However, we're dealing with something that's unknown. So we need to build trust with these systems. So for organizations, what I would recommend is that make sure that everyone in the organization is on a paid plan. If they're on free, generally, if it's free, you are the product, which means your data is being used to train the models. So from an organizational point of view, you want the additional security that being on a paid plan offers. And then most organizations are either Microsoft or they'll be using Google Docs and Google Drive. So use the tools that are embedded within that workspace. So that's Gemini or Copilot. You know, Gemini, I wouldn't have recommended at the end of last year. It's really stepped up a notch. It is very good. And Copilot is not that great. However, it's worth the trade-off for the additional security. So if you're on a paid Copilot account, then you have all the security that you do for any of the other Microsoft documents that you use. So you can share sensitive information. It has the same protection as everything else. So what we see with organizations is that they'll trade off functionality for additional security. So you know, Copilot is a dumbed down version of ChatGPT. However, it is still good and it will help you. So use a paid plan, paid AI plan within your workspace. And that's going to give you the best combination of security and functionality.
And I suppose in terms of sort of going forward, really, just as a thinking on your 5 sort of steps, you said cheating. People feel this sort of being cheated, or they're cheating. Sorry, they're creating these wonderful proposals, responding to emails that they've used ChatGPT. How do you get around that? How have you helped people to sort of not feel they are cheating?
So it's really interesting, often just by calling it out. So often when we go in and do training in organizations, just calling it out, people will self-identify in the room. They'll go, oh yes, I'm in the difference phase, or I'm in fear, or yes, I produced this document. And actually, and I've even had it in rooms where I've said to the manager, yeah, I wasn't sure if it was okay to tell you I used AI, so I didn't tell you. So you create that environment in which there can be honest communication. So just by naming it is often an unlocker. And then it's about what is your AI policy. So what we see in a lot of organizations is shadow AI. So people aren't sure what the rules of engagement are with AI. So they're using it like they've got their own accounts that they're paying for and they're switching between it at work, and they're still. So if you think people aren't using AI in your workspace, then I can guarantee you're wrong. We even large banks, so high street banks that you will have heard of, have completely banned most people in the organization from using AI because of the concerns around privacy, and they're not quite ready yet to get everyone a paid seat on Copilot. So I know people in those organizations that actually have their own account on their phone. They'll have their phone with their laptop. They'll use it to do their little AI piece that's going to save them a huge amount of time. They'll then email it to themselves and then use it for work. So that is the risk. AI is happening even if you're not aware of it. And that means that AI culture is being set for you and you won't like it.
Which means you have to probably start to think about putting policies in place of how you might manage that as well. Because if you don't want to embrace it, well, you've got to embrace it really, otherwise you're going to be left behind. But how
And
you
I
embrace
think
it?
that's it is an investment. It's not a cost as long as you implement it in a thoughtful way.
I suppose just one final question. I suppose what's your message to employees who are feeling, I suppose, overwhelmed, left behind at all the changes that's going on? How would you sort of reassure them?
I'd reassure them by saying, yes, we are going through a huge change cycle. Nobody really knows what it's going to look like. Humans are terrible at predicting the future. All they can do is control their world and their skill set. So if they're concerned, start looking at free courses. We have one that we're just building at the moment. And where can you upskill yourself? What roles are there? If you're concerned about your role maybe being phased out over time, where else can you use your skill set? What else can you pivot to? Because AI unlocks all of that. So I'll give you a really basic, probably an irrelevant example. So back in the day, probably 3 years ago, they were predicting that India was going to be one of the hardest hit nations because about 10%, a large amount of their GDP comes from low-level coding. So AI is a fantastic coder. So those people will all be displaced. What's actually happened in reality is those low-level coders have used AI to train themselves to be higher level coders, and they're just doing a higher level of work. So a simple example, and so AI will upskill you in how to use AI. It's a bit meta, but okay. So how could you take your skills to another level or move them sideways? The jobs are still going to exist. We have a number of large bodies predicting net growth and employment. So where can you move sideways or up in your skill level so that the future of work fits you?
That's super helpful, Mary. And in fact, the whole conversation's been really helpful and really pragmatic, which is what I like about it. It's not been all sort of ether stuff. It's actually been very robust and feet on the ground, which I think is how you operate and work, and very human centric as well. Because I think that's the important thing is the humans, the people bits in all this. It's not displacing them. It's actually how we can upskill and embrace it in a way that can be more helpful for us to hit our goals in our organizations very well. Really, thank you for coming on the show. If people want to sort of connect with you and get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
LinkedIn is where to find me. I think there's a pink banner on my LinkedIn profile if you go to my profile page, but Mary Kemp, AI Potential, you'll find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today, Mary.
Julian, as usual, I always feel lucky when I've spent time with you, and I'm really looking forward to our continuing conversations.
Excellent.